authentic self. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Roy Sexton. He is the director of marketing at the Clark Hill Law Firm in Detroit. He was named one of the top 100 LGBTQ execs in the country by Involve Outstanding in 2023. And in 2024, he was named one of Michigan's most valuable professionals. So thank you, Roy, for joining
Thank
us.
you for having me. It's truly an honor. I'm thrilled. I've been a fan of HRC Michigan since I moved here in 1999, and if you had told me 26 years later I'd be interviewed, I wouldn't have believed it. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, we're so excited to have you here today. Do you want to give us a quick introduction with your pronouns, maybe your position?
Sure, sure. Roy Sexton, he, him. I have lived in Michigan since 1999, born and raised in Indiana, but moved up here to work at Deloitte Consulting 1,000 years ago. I was in healthcare for about a decade at Oakwood Healthcare, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now part of Corewell. And in 2011, I just threw my resume out there and got hired by my first law firm. It was Trott and Trott, which is a mortgage foreclosure firm with a Republican congressman. So I'm sure there's a special place in hell for me that I worked there for 6 years. But Dave was great and very supportive of me and my husband at the time, and that got me into law. And I worked at Kerr Russell, and that led me to Clark Hill, which is a law firm of 715 attorneys, 29 offices across the country, and also Dublin and Mexico City. So we're a full service law firm, corporate law. And that also introduced me to the Legal Marketing Association, which there is an association of people who do what I do. There are 4,000 of us worldwide, and I was lucky enough to be their international president last year.
That's an amazing achievement. And also, it's just great to hear, too, your story from finding different law firms that you work for, growing up in Michigan, and just seeing all the great and amazing work that you've done since then. So thank you
Yeah,
for sharing.
my cousin who is in Indiana, I was part of the CrowdStrike travel issues over the weekend. We had our firm retreat in Las Vegas, and I was stuck, and I posted home again, and he said, "Wait, Michigan's home, not Columbia City, Indiana?" I said, "Rob, I've lived here 25 years. Michigan is my home now." So
Yeah, no, definitely. Um, well, that's really great. I'm so glad to have you here too, and just learning from all your experiences working at different law firms and kind of finding your own place in the world. I'm really curious to just learn more about that too. Going off with one of the heavy hitters, you were recently named one of the top 100 LGBTQ executives in the United States. What does this achievement mean to you?
I, I keep waiting for them to take it away. And what's crazy is Elton John's husband was on the list too. That's why I was just like, wait, why am I on this list exactly? It means a lot. I mean, when I moved here, and especially when I was working at Oakwood, I would read Crane's Detroit weekly religiously, and there were always lists 40 under 40 and fabulous 50s. I don't remember what they all were, and I thought I'm never going to be on any list my entire career. So to be at this point, and to be acknowledged for what I have tried to do, which is bring authenticity into a business setting and to encourage people to be their fullest selves, while obviously respectful of, that we're a business and we have responsibilities, that has been pretty great. I I do a lot. I put myself out there a lot, but I don't always know that people are paying attention. So the fact that this was acknowledged in this way, my work with the Legal Marketing Association, my work just being an advocate for our community, it still blows my mind, quite frankly. And like I said, I keep waiting for them to call and go, we made a mistake. We didn't mean for you to be on there, but yeah, it's very validating.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we're noticing the work that you're doing. They're noticing the work that you're doing, and it's really important work. A lot of people think that, progressing LGBTQ plus rights and inclusion happens only in the legislature, but it happens
Mhm.
places as well. And you've been a testament to that. So,
Well,
um,
and kudos to you too, Annie. I mean, I'm watching what you're doing on social media. You're building a wonderful presence and voice, and doing things like this, the clips you shared of people talking about, what their individual experiences are. I think when we tell our stories and we humanize our community, and show people, there's a lot of vilification of the LGBT community. We've seen it in the last 12 to 18 months, particularly. I think as the political season heats up, it's going to get worse. And, we could try to be keyboard jockeys and argue with people who, or bots or whatever, who don't want to argue back with us, or we can simply live our lives and show that we're here, we're contributing to our communities, we're paying our taxes, we are making the world a better place, and, let's live and let live.
Right. And especially too in 2023 we saw an unprecedented amount of attacks on LGBTQ plus
Yeah,
people. So having conversations and opening it up, talking about inclusion, really adding the humanity back into it. That's what it's all about.
yeah.
So couldn't
And
have said.
and honestly, that's why I really am an introvert and want to be left alone most of the time. So when, people give me opportunities like this, or people recognize me like Involve did, or Court Magazine, I post that not because I want adulation, but I want visibility on those pieces. And I encourage all of us, if you have a recognition, if you've done something in your community, if you just, adopted a dog, if you're volunteering at a soup kitchen, share that on social media. Make sure people see what you are doing. That positive message is transformative. And I think it means a lot to people who maybe don't have a voice yet.
Right. Right. And I think what you said too, it's setting an example too for other people to know that, this is possible and that change can be achieved. And I think that kind of leads into the next question, which is, what was it like being, a young queer person entering the workforce, back then in the 90s versus, now? How have you seen that change over the years?
It, it's interesting. I'm an odd fellow. You might have picked up on that. And I don't know that I was ever completely in the closet. I was an only child. I'm an only child. And I think the biggest concern for me is my parents didn't know until about the year 2000. And I was really trying to figure it out myself. Well, college, I was focused on my studies. It really wasn't something I thought I knew, but I didn't know what my options were, I guess. I think that's the biggest difference. I didn't know what options I had. And went to graduate school, and wasn't till I moved to Detroit and met the man who would end up being my husband that I was like, oh, I see what my life is like. And then I came out to my parents, but people in my life knew and had an awareness. I suppose it was a bit of an open secret, which I think was hard on my parents because they knew I had people that I was trying to figure this out with that weren't them. But parents of an only child, especially of a certain era, back then, I think the difference is too, it was seen as a failing in some respects that your child was gay, or it was perceived that way. I think my parents came to a point they realized that was not the case. They had given me a platform to be myself and to not be afraid of being myself. I was just afraid of telling them. Um, and so once I had done that, and it was difficult, there were 2 or 3 years that were quite difficult. For my mom especially, she's was very liberal. She's no longer with us. Very liberal, very progressive, but lived in a small town in Indiana, very conservative town, and I was everything. She put all her energy into me. I was first in my class. I had gotten these accolades, this kind of way I've lived my life. Um, and she loved the song MacArthur Park. And one of the lines is, someone left my cake in the rain, out in the rain, and I don't think that I can take it because it took so long to bake it. I was that cake. So when this one aspect of me came out, I think initially she was feeling like people in her community would give her a hard time. Oh, Roy, the perfect boy, is this. And I think there was an element of that. She also had friends who said I wasn't surprised. They weren't surprised. And that upset her. And I think they were saying it to be comforting. So I think working through all that at an individual level was the hardest piece. But in the workplace, weirdly enough, maybe because I worked in healthcare, I worked at Deloitte, I worked in academia early on, I was already around people that I felt safe with. And I, again, as an only child, I tend to ping off people and test the situation. So, now I'll say my husband when I'm talking to someone. And if I seem to get a reaction, I'm like, this is not a space I want to be in.
Mm,
9 times out of 10 in my entire life, I've not really felt that. I realize I've come from an entitled place. I'm a white man. So being gay adds a level of interest for people sometimes, as opposed to, kind of turning me away. It's also interesting. I grew up in this very conservative town. It remains very conservative. And I see the posts my friends make and people I went to high school with. But when I'm there and I'm with them, there's such a schism between what rhetoric they put online
mm,
and the way we interact individually. And I think that's where we've gotten a bit frightening as a country, because I still think people at the individual level, I know there are notable exceptions and we need to maintain our safety, but I feel like I don't face that kind of rejection if I just show up as myself, authentically interested in the other person. I think that's the other trick. As a theater person, I've always been, I ask a lot of questions of other people so they feel like they've had a great conversation with me. And I think that's why I don't get challenged for being myself the way other people might at times.
I think that's really important too, just seeing how, the dialogue changes and having that intersectionality too is an important piece of it. But of course, like your experience is valid, and it can take people. A lot of people have different perspectives and assumptions and stereotypes, and what we're trying to do is really correct those, right? Because
Yeah.
we don't want to see that. And
Mm-mm.
I'm really curious to just hear more too about your firm's Pride Affinity group,
Yeah.
because I think having workplaces that are inclusive of LGBTQ plus people, that's one of the ways that we can start ending some of those negative stereotypes and vilification, and also just build better understanding. So, could you tell us a little bit about when your firm's Pride Affinity group was created,
Sure.
and any challenges you maybe faced in helping shape and impact that group?
Yeah. And hi to my friend Diana Lauritsen. She just said, "We love you, Roy. I love you, Diana." It's people like Diana that give you the wind in your sails. She's part of the Legal Marketing Association. We're the international board together, and she's been an ally, and I've been an ally to her. She's a woman of color, and she has a strong voice in terms of speaking her truth. And I think we lean into each other, right? And I think that's important. I make that note. Find your communities, and they might not only be the LGBTQ community. There are other folks that have walked similar but different paths. Don't presume you understand their journey, but learn from it as they learn from yours. And when you separate and go out, you become voices for each other in ways that are powerful. So, hello, Diana, and love you. Thank you for watching. In terms of the firm, it's interesting. I can't take credit for what the firm has done. What I love about this firm and what I found when I was interviewing is that I could tell 6 years ago it was already a space that was welcoming to individuals. I got that vibe right away. The other thing Clark Hill has done in terms of its growth, it is combined with a lot of other organizations over the years. So our growth has come both organically and through a combination with other regional firms. We started as a primarily Midwest firm, and then they expanded to the East Coast, they expanded to the West Coast, and then in my early days, they had just combined with offices in Texas, the Strasburger firm. That firm, Texas, I repeat, Texas, they had an unbelievable program around inclusion. Before it was fashionable to do so, they had member resource groups around people of color, women, and the LGBTQ community. And what I like about Clark Hill is when they combine with these other organizations, they're like, that's a best practice. Let's adopt that. Let's bring that to our other offices. So if anything that I helped with, but only alongside a lot of other people, was helping spread the word that these groups exist and that they're not only for attorneys, they're for everybody in the firm. I think that's an important piece to note when you're in a law firm. The other thing we've done is we've added other groups. We've added a veterans group. I would encourage people when they're thinking about these resource groups, think about that. What are the other groups that are feeling like they don't have a voice? And so my role as a marketing person has been to help the Pride group particularly, but I do it with all of them. What is our internal messaging, but also what is our external messaging?
Mm.
So each of those affinity months, whether it's Pride or African American History Month, Women's History Month, Veterans Day, our team, particularly a colleague of mine, Alex France. Alex, I love you. She's you, Annie. She's our social media guru and does a wonderful job. But she works with those folks. She's done allyship training. She does their social media and she creates content with them. We did, for example, a panel discussion a couple of years ago with a couple of trans athletes to talk about what is that experience like. And so we use our platform to educate our followers and our firm, as well as anybody on the outside, about issues that are facing. And we work within that committee to say what are the top issues right now. And we have some fun too. We put playlists together. For Pride Month, we just make sure we have great content through every week. We do spotlights. We'll do a video each beginning of Pride Month. Our CEO will offer a welcome. We'll hear from different members of that community. And it's important to keep visibility around that message. And I think if you're in a position like mine, make the most of it, you know, and if you're in an organization that supports you in that way, really run with it. And I'm very fortunate. I work at a company that sees the value in embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, that they realize from a recognition, acquisition, retention perspective, it's so important that everybody has that opportunity to have a voice. And we just, like I said, came from our firm retreat, and our keynote talked about the science of happiness, and that authenticity is how people can be their most connected at work. So we need to lean into that and support each other in that way. And our CEO got up there and said, "This is important to us. This is important to our differentiation and for our talent." And you know, I'm lucky. I'm lucky, and I do everything I can to signal boost that. So
And I think it's so great too that, you know, you're in the position of the director of marketing, and you're having, you know, a tangible actions and impacts that go along with that. Like you said, like shaping the different groups, not just the Pride Affinity group, but also making sure that there's
right,
visibility for veterans and women. And I think that's really important too. And that's something we try to highlight too with the Human Rights Campaign, is that we're fighting for equality and equity for
yeah,
everyone, right? Because we're not,
human rights, yeah.
yeah. And yeah, that's just really great to hear. And I'm glad that you could be such of an influence and help kind of like shape that. What did it mean to you kind of entering that firm that already had some inclusivity and included in it? How did that kind of make you feel?
It made me feel safe. It made me feel like I could focus simply on the work. And this is the part we have to impress upon folks. When we talk about entitlement, it doesn't mean that somebody came from a place of great wealth.
Mm.
It means they came from a place of access that they might take for granted. I know the intersectionality of my entitlement. I can walk down the street as a white man of a certain age if I'm not. This is, by the way, this is one of the contraband Target shirts from last year. I wear it with pride, no pun intended. Um,
But
and you know, I get to walk down the street and pass if I wanted to. I don't. Um, so knowing that, for many of us, we don't have that ability. We have to first see, am I safe in this space? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of energy, and that's a lot of work and energy to do over and over, daily, hourly. And when you're expending your energy on that, you're not giving your organization your best.
mhm.
You know, I'm an introvert, an only child. I'm a bit of a late bloomer. I know I need to know I'm in a calm, safe space to be able to then come up with great ideas to do my best work. And if I'm constantly using my mental energy to go, am I being judged? Am I okay here? Is someone gonna try to get me fired? Is someone gonna try to get me in trouble with HR? Is someone going to give me a hard time, or my husband a hard time, or whatever? Then I'm not giving you my all. So
Mm.
I think companies, we're having, LMA has a wonderful series of member resource groups, and as well as an allyship group. And we met earlier today and we had a conversation, and someone brought up, what should be the right motivation? Should it be pragmatism, or should it be altruism to be inclusive? And I said, why can't it be both? Does it matter if the outcome is the same? So if the desire for the firm is to make more money and bring in, letting people check, celebrate, but check their identity at the door so they can focus on the work, you benefit from that. You're also doing the right thing. So you can do both.
Yeah, I think I think it's important, and I'm so glad too that you were entering into a company that was open to hearing new ideas and had that
Mhm.
for DEI even 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty consistent with what you said too about, you know, in order to be able to get the work done and, you know, to do well in, you know, my career and in the workspace, you first have to have that layer of safety, and having those basic needs and inclusion met. And what we found too is that in 2023, when we declared like the state of emergency for LGBTQ plus rights, and we took into account all of the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation that was going on, One of the things that we found in our surveys is that in states where the anti-LGBTQ legislation was passed, 1 in 3 people have thought of moving out of their
Hmm.
state simply
Hmm.
because the legislation was against them, and infringing upon their basic human rights. And so just thinking about, the impact that that has on jobs and communities and family businesses, there really is a direct impact on the legislation and the culture and the rhetoric, and how that affects LGBTQ plus families, and individuals. And it has a large impact on work. And,
Yeah.
having that safe place at work, in the state, that's really vital to protecting the stability, and the rights of people. So I'm
And
glad.
it has an impact on the people who love those people.
Hmm.
I think what some folks maybe fail to see is the world is evolving whether you want it to or not. And you might have a desire to run people like me out of town. But there are a lot of people who love and care about me, and you're impacting them too. And you really need to think about, don't you want to keep your best and brightest around to bring their best ideas to your community? And where does it end? Where do you stop deciding someone doesn't belong? And when you get so segmented, your quite frankly, your economic engine is going to be ground to a halt. People are not, the places where people want to live, where they feel comfortable to live, that's where you have a great tax base. That's where people are building businesses. That's where you have thriving communities. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. So I think, again, it's interesting how we have gotten so far afield from, I think, what stated policy was for a lot of our, you know, politicians versus what actions they've taken that are really contrary to what I think their priorities once were.
Yeah. And it's just crazy seeing how things have evolved and the progress that we've made, but also still in 2024, how we're kind of backsliding on some of those key things that we fought so hard for. And
But let me, I'm old. I don't think we're backsliding as much as we think we feel like we are. It was interesting to me this June, last June, I thought was misery. I thought, oh, wow, is this what June is going to be like? And I feel like there's a lot of theater happening right now. It's like, who are we going to pick on to see what political points we're going to gain? I think when you pick on the gay community, you got to watch out. There's a wonderful group of women in my hometown. Last year, uh, and unfortunately, my cousin Rob was part of the group that did the other side. The library had a pride display, and um, town went nuts. How dare they have these books in our library? Well, you know what that did? That prompted the development of a pride group. And they had their first Pride Festival this year, and it was a roaring success. And people came from all over Allen County. Columbia City, Indiana, now has Whitley County has a Pride group with a Pride Festival that was a great success. And I wonder, again, I'm not part of that think tank, if people watched and they said, "Oh wow, we actually just emboldened a group of people to be that much more vociferous, to develop uh, groups that didn't exist before that have now institutionalized in communities like Columbia City where they didn't have such a thing." So careful what you wish for. So you might try to chase up the drag queens, but a guy like me will do what I did in Florida at our annual conference, which I think I sent you the video. I had already decided I wanted to open singing Born This Way to about 1,500 legal marketers at 8:30 in the morning. And I'm usually not that performatively gay. I was in sequins head to toe. I'm usually not that guy, but I thought, I'm going for broke. And then I said, can I get a drag queen? And Athena Dion, who's the queen of Miami, and I don't realize now she's taking pictures of herself with Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth, who's in Mykonos right now performing. And I'm like, wow, I picked a good one. She came out of the second verse, and the crowd was on its feet. I thought we're going to get arrested because that was when DeSantis was taking away liquor licenses and stuff. It was a surprise. I mean, people behind the scenes knew it, but it created a safe space for people, and it was a bold choice, and it was fun. And I was like, you know what? I don't like that my community is being attacked. In the past, I would have maybe posted a few things online or made some comments separately, but I have a moment and I'm going to take it and I'm going to do this crazy thing and I hope it goes well. And it did. And I think that's the part in all of this that when we feel like we're backsliding, you just got to take a breath and know that people are going to say things online that they're probably not going to take action on in real life. People are going to try to force legislation forward that's actually not going to make it through, but it gets a lot of attention. It gets a headline. It makes us feel bad. People go into Target and say, "Why is this display up? Take it down." And if you bend, as Target did, well, now they've lost everybody. They lost the people who they had support from because they had a pride display, and the people who were mad about the pride display weren't going to shop there anyway. They've lost everybody. So you have to stay the course. It will work out. I'm old enough. It goes back and forth, but it does work out. And on the balance, I think people really just want people, they just want to be left alone and they want to live their own lives. They'll say a lot of stuff online. Politicians will try to make a scapegoat out of us. But if we stay the course, we stay strong, we keep our sense of humor, we keep our visibility up, we lead with love, it does work out. And talk to me in a year and you can go, Roy, you were so wrong about that, but I don't think I am.
No, I think you're definitely right. And in times where there's so many attacks, rhetoric against LGBTQ plus people for just existing, that's the time, like you said, to be even more visible, to create those pride groups. And just
Yeah.
hearing, what you said, Columbia City, and like that success, like that's really remarkable too.
Yeah.
Curious.
And don't try to your minds are not going to change. Don't get baited into having an argument with someone that is just making a point at your expense. Because if you act ugly, you're they win because
Mhm.
you forget there are a whole lot of people around who are quietly watching and they're deciding who's the person I want to be around. And I think if you stand up straight, stay the course, and I hope I don't sound naive or out of touch. I just feel like remember there's a whole lot of silent people watching, and you're never going to change that particular mindset. They don't even believe what they're saying. They're just saying it to get attention. So don't give them that attention.
You couldn't have said it better. I love that. Don't give them that attention, because some people are just not open to those conversations. But it's important
No.
that this year and every day around, that we're trying to have those conversations with people who are open to them, and trying to explain, what we're for, and that's for human rights, and visibility and success stories, like yourself. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, kind of the success of some of the marketing strategies that you've done to kind of further DEI, and what that kind of impact has had, on your workplace.
Yeah, we make sure Clark Hill's values are integral to who we are. One of them is everyone matters, and I love that. And so when we relaunched our brand in 2000, it was right after the pandemic, 2021. We are going to launch in 2020, and we're like, we're going to wait, which is good because it gave us a little more time to calibrate that. So we made sure our values were part of that brand launch. We're a law firm. At the end of the day, we're there to mitigate risk on our clients' behalf and make sure they get the outcomes they want. That's why we're there. But they also want to know they're working with people that are human, they can connect with, and that understand their business. So our brand, when we relaunched that, we used video very effectively and we talked about our values and we made sure that we had the voices of everyone in the firm as part of that video and not just attorneys. We had staff members, we had leaders, we had attorneys all talking about why do they work at Clark Hill? What makes us different? Why do we care about our clients and the people who work there? It was, and we didn't get specific around DEI in that kind of like, let's address DEI. It just was visible. It was there. It was about the conversations and the humanity of our people. So in that first year, we had like 500,000 views of our videos. Next year, we had about 1 million views of our videos.
Wow.
Partly because I'm really obnoxious on social media and we're going to promote Boost. We did some account-based marketing around that to make sure that we're driving people in the business community and industry publications to see our new brand. But I had to launch the brand somehow, and in our minds, and it wasn't just me; it was our whole team. It's my boss, my colleagues in business development, the whole marketing team, our C-suite. They all were part of this. The people who took part in the interviews. It was just important to show the humanity of the firm and because we got that response, that people resonate, the brand resonated with people. And what we're finding now is the group we just had joined in Atlanta folks are coming and they want to be part of Clark Hill because of what we've put out there from a messaging perspective. And it's not just the LGBT community, it's women, it's people of color, it's just people. To your point about human rights, it's people who are like, I want to work with people who care about people. So we're finding that part of our growth strategy is combining with other organizations, and those organizations are raising their hand going, I want some of that. What are you doing over there? And that works really well for us.
And I think too, like you said, like staying true to your messaging and putting out those values, right, in those
Yeah.
ads and videos, that's really important to kind of show, what the core of the company is, and also to have that diversity, uh, showing all types of different staff members, not only, the executives and the attorneys, but the other people who are behind the scenes who often don't get the credit that they should. So,
Yeah.
really, really, really remarkable to hear about that. And I know that you kind of touched on it a little bit already, but what do you think workplaces should be doing to further LGBTQ plus rights and DEI?
Well, first, as comfortable, talk to your LGBTQ staff. Find out what their needs are. Find out what their concerns are. I always find it interesting, and I've seen it happen time and time again, and you've probably been on the receiving end of it. Somebody decides for us, we're going to do this for you. Okay, did you ask me? Did you ask me what my needs were, what my hopes were? I go to work to fund my existence, right? And to hopefully have fulfillment and to grow. Um, so first and foremost, are you making sure there are substantive job opportunities for your own LGBTQ? Before you start talking to the world, talk to your own people. Are you feeling that you have the opportunities to advance as you'd like? What opportunities would you like to have? And work at the individual level. And I think that's scary for people. They're like, well, what if they ask for something I can't do? Then talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But start there. And then once have an inventory of who is there, who feels comfortable, some people might not want to volunteer their LGBTQ until they know it's a space where their career won't be hurt for that. So
Right.
that way you get to know who is in your community. Then create that member resource group where they can get together and commiserate and talk about their needs and use that as an opportunity to fulfill probably, oops, I'm losing my AirPods. I'm just a mess. You can't let me out of that box. But these never stay in my ear. Someone's got to tell me how that works. Anyway, so what? Hi,
I
I'm back. But find out from them what's important to them, and then let that define what your external message is. And at that point, they'll want to be part of it. They will want to tell others about your organization. I think people jump past that and they want to put a campaign together.
mm-hmm.
You have alluded to what did it feel like to be a young person a long time ago when we didn't have rainbow slapped on everything. I remember the days where we had a friend who had a pride flag hanging outside their house, and we were like, I hope that's okay. And now I walk through and Oreos have rainbows on them. And I think that's great. I would have loved to have seen that as a young
Yeah.
person, because even if it's corporate, uh, what do they call it? Rainbow washing, it's still there. It's still saying, look, you're okay. We want to, you have money. We want to sell to you. I mean, that's America, right? So it's a little off, but it's also like, great. I'm glad corporate America sees the opportunity and they're making it visible. But by the same token, don't just do that if you don't have the substance within your organization, because you're doing yourself more harm than good. It's going to trip you up from a PR media perspective at some point. You're going to see companies that are marketing to the LGBT community, but they're not providing fundamental needs internal. That's not going to work out for you. And also, what you do externally is not going to be informed from an authentic place. So, I guess first start with your own people. Find out what their experience is, and be willing to take some lumps. Here's some stuff that's uncomfortable, because I think, sometimes I'm not in this organization, but I've worked with organizations where the executives say they want to hear what's going on, but then when they hear it, they don't like what they hear, and they're like, well, we're just going to pretend we didn't hear that. No, you do something with that. You will find that the return will be immeasurable.
Yeah, and I like how you brought it up on a small too. The first step is really just having those conversations
Yeah.
about inclusion. What can we do to support you and make you feel comfortable at work. And then in a larger perspective too, those corporations that are putting out these things for Pride and having these, Pride logos slapped on for the month of June, are they really being inclusive? Are they really furthering LGBTQ plus rights and supporting their workforce? And that's one of the things at the Human Rights Campaign that we've really tried to solidify and get down with our Corporate Equality Index, which basically measures how equitable and inclusive industries, companies, law firms are of LGBTQ plus rights. And our HRC Foundation, when they do this CEI report, it evaluates things like DEI trainings. Are they being inclusive of LGBTQ individuals and intersectionality? In terms of benefits at these companies, do employers provide the same amount of health insurance coverage for same and different sex spouses and partners? Things like what is the availability for routine care and transition-related medical coverage for transgender employees and dependents? And when we first started, this corporate equality index and the surveys, we found in 2002 that we had just only 13 companies achieve a perfect score of 100. Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
And are companies then using that index to improve? I mean, are you seeing companies start to, because when I was at Oakwood, we did something called the Malcolm Baldrige recognition, which was a process of having somebody come in and basically audit everything. You put in a submission, and then they said, and that was pure business. Are you transparent in your reporting? How's your strategic planning process, the community? But we used that then as an opportunity to get better year over year over year. And I hope companies are realizing this is great data for them to make improvement, not just to go, oh, well, we didn't do so well, but to say, well, you're handing people a blueprint for how to improve. Are they taking you up on that?
yep,
Good.
exactly. With that CEI index and those scores that they're getting, they're seeing, okay, what are areas that we're doing really well in terms of inclusion and supporting LGBTQ plus individuals, and what are areas that we're lacking in. And in 2023, in comparison to the only 13, corporations, businesses that received a perfect score of 100, in 2023, we've now had 545.
Holy cow!
Yeah, that have earned a perfect score on our corporate equality index. So there's
That's amazing.
definitely change in the workplace, right? Like,
Nice.
and
Well done.
the work that you've been doing too is furthering that inclusion, doing those things like videos and having that visibility.
Yeah.
Like, that is so important. So
Every bit helps. And shout out to Marcia, another legal marketing friend. She said it was fantastic. I think she's talking about the drag queen. I don't know at this point. That was probably a comment a little while ago. Thank you, Marcia.
Yeah. So I think, the work that you're doing to further inclusion is so important. And with the Corporate Equality Index too, we've seen that, workplaces are becoming more inclusive spaces for LGBTQ plus individuals. So
yeah.
And
that's why I want people to, that, and I keep interrupting you because I'm a man of a certain age. It's what we do. We should all just be sent on a boat. When we talk about, we see headlines that feel demoralizing. We feel like, oh, this state is coming after us, this, politician, this celebrity, but steadily, quietly, you went from 13 to 5, what'd you say, 500 what? 540?
45. Yep.
That happened. That happened during the same span of time we're talking about that we felt like the world was going backward. So 13 to 5, so 500 and I can't do math, 520 more companies said we want to get on the bandwagon. And how many employees, multiply that by how many employees they have. What is their social media following? What is their consumer base? So the multiplier of that's amazing.
And like you said too, it's a large impact, right? It's not just 545 companies, it's the thousands and hundreds of employees working.
And their friends, their family, people who buy whatever they're selling, people who are interviewing, that's the ripple effects on that are pretty profound.
And I know we talked a lot about kind of like authenticity in the workplace, and you've kind of highlighted the importance of that from your most recent conference, but also in just how you approach your work. What are just some ways that you have really honored your authentic self in the workplace? How can,
I'm not afraid to look like an idiot. For example, the way I am still trying to get my phone to come across normally, and I'm dropping my earbud. I think the pandemic gave us all a chance to not try to be perfect. And I think a lot of, I worked with an executive coach several years ago, and I learned a couple things from her that I was an introvert, which I didn't believe at the time, but I understood was where I get my energy. She also said, "You love to put yourself in harm's way and see what happens, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, kind of." And she also said, I said, "Look, I want to get everything just right. I want everything to be perfect so no one gives me a hard time for being gay." And she said, "Roy, everyone knows you're gay and they love you anyway. And not in any way, not anyway, I don't mean that, but they love you. You don't have to keep trying so hard." So I think a lot of us carry that burden like, "Oh, I've got to be perfect. I'm gonna let this go again. It's gonna cut off my head. I don't care." We try to be perfect and we think that will win people over when the truth of the matter is being imperfect, being real. And I don't have to be super gay all the time. I can be the nerd that likes, Marvel comics and buys too many action figures and doesn't exercise enough and eats too much fried food. And, just be who you are. People are going to gravitate to that. Deliver on what you're there to deliver, do the work, uh, respond when people need a response, deliver when they need something, exceed their expectations. But don't feel like you have to be overly perfect. I think people respond more to someone who is being themselves, but being in the moment, talking to the person. For me, doing something like this, I want to ask you as many questions as you're asking me, but I realize that's not the point. I've done that a couple times. You know that's gonna help people connect with you. So when people and I have this basement webcast I do. Basement, I'm in my basement. It's called Expert Webcast, and it's all about how authenticity can and help people enhance their personal and professional brands. And even once I pick the word, I'm like, oh god, everyone's saying authenticity, it's tiresome. But it's about being genuine. Just be regular and think about, if you're not sure how to take that path, think about the celebrities you like. For me, it's Jennifer Garner, Ryan Reynolds, Viola Davis, um, Kelly Clarkson. I'm trying to think of other people that oh, why can't I think of her name all of a sudden? Oh, I can see her name now. She was in Hidden Figures. Doesn't matter. I Point is, people that are great performers, but they're also really real on
Mhm.
Instagram or when they're interviewed. They're not afraid to be completely themselves, be a little goofy, be a human being. That's authenticity to me. It doesn't give you a pass on not doing the work, but it does make people say, I want to know that person better. I want to see their movie. I want to hire them. I want to follow their company. So I use social media pretty aggressively in that regard. I sometimes people are like, why are you posting pictures of your dogs on LinkedIn? Because people love my dogs. And they love that John and I rescued two dogs, and they want to know how Henry, Jay, and Hudson are doing. Um, that leads them to read articles about the firm. That leads them to follow the causes that are important to me. So, share who you are, where it's comfortable for you, and people are going to respond to that.
Yeah, I love how you said, people are going to respond to your authentic self, and that's really how you're going to draw people in.
Hmm.
I don't know if because it's been, ingrained in me through working at HRC, but I really do believe that when you come in being your authentic self and with your unique perspective and identity, you truly do make it a better place, whether that's because of your economic background, whether it's because of your gender
Hmm.
identity, sexuality. I think there's so much perspective to be
Yeah,
gained.
and
And
all of those are aspects of, we really talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what makes me mad when people say things like DEI hire. Come on. My diversity is, I'm gay. I'm an only child. I'm left-handed. I love comic books. I grew up in Indiana. I went to an all-male college. Don't hold that against me. I have a theater degree. I have talked my way into jobs I'm not qualified to have. I got my MBA later because my husband said, why I have a theater degree. Those are all parts of
Mhm.
my diversity. Um, and so me being able to then access those things, I've brought things into my legal marketing that come directly from my theater degree, not my MBA. The ability to read an audience, frame a narrative, engage, produce, that comes from my theater training. So, but if I put that in a box and said, I must not access that, that's not appropriate for a law firm, they'd miss out on some innovation that I believe I brought to our work. So, again, when you think about these kind of programs in your organization, yes, have the resource groups that follow the kind of major macro identity, but then also understand that within that, there's a whole multiplicity of experience and background. And if people feel like they can pull from that and leverage it, you're going to really shine as an organization.
Mhm. And like you mentioned too, like, we wouldn't have connected if it wasn't for, our theater connection, this
Mm-mm,
wasn't a political connection at all. So um,
no.
there's a lot to be said there. Kind of starting to wrap up, I'll have like two more questions for you.
Okay.
One of them is just, being, an LGBTQ exec, one of the top 100 in the country, working as the director of marketing, having kind of all these accolades and titles. What would that have meant really to your younger self, seeing a
Yeah.
person Q plus community in a position of influence? What would that have meant to you
Yeah,
30
and
years
I'm
ago?
starting to think people are giving me awards just because I've already gotten awards. I'm really not sure why so this keeps happening, but I it would have meant a great deal, a great deal. I think, and I encourage organizations to consider that when they are acknowledging, and not just the LGBT community, but anybody. Make sure you have a nice array of representation, and it's not about checking a box. It's really about having your audience, which let's face it, these companies come up with these award recognitions because they want to sell ads, they want to sell tickets to galas, they want to grow their audience. Great. Let's not be shy about that.
Mhm.
That's the game. Good. So if you want that, then you want to make sure that people out there who want to be seen are seen in your list because they're going to be your decision makers one day. They're going to be your advertisers. They're going to be the people who submit applications for these kinds of things or people submit on their behalf. So be mindful of that. And yes, again, pragmatism and altruism. There's going to be some young man like I was in 2000, 2001, flipping through cranes going, gosh, I don't see any LGBTQ or known, or, they now have their own list of LGBTQ executives. They didn't then. Um, it gives you a sense that you're going to be okay. If you're having a bad time like I had with my parents when I was coming out and they thought I was torpedoing my career and what was I doing and what was my life going to be like and why was I making this so hard on myself, I would have been able to look at that and say, I'm not. There are people who are successful. There are people who are able to connect in the way we're connecting, and they're not shy and they're not ashamed and they're celebrating themselves and they're being celebrated for it. So you're creating a moment for a lot of young people who might feel like they don't have hope. And I don't want to put myself on a pedestal because I sound ridiculous, but that's why I have done some of what I've done and why I think I leaned in so hard last year when I was LMA president to my LGBTQ identity, which always was a factor in a lot of what I did, but I really put it front and center because I saw our community under attack. And I thought, well, in my little corner of the universe, I can at least be my goofy self and hope people say, good, I'll, I'll be all right. I'll be all right.
Yeah. And I think too, we've made a lot of progress in terms of having that visibility of LGBTQ plus people in positions of power, in positions of influence. But there's really still so much more that can be done, and this upcoming election is so vital into securing those rights and also just allowing
Yeah.
that. So kind of understanding, how LGBTQ plus rights are really under attack right now. What words of advice do you have for allies or LGBTQ plus members to really stay resilient and motivated
Yeah.
in times?
Well, first to the allies, check in with us. You see a headline or a news item, don't do it in a pandering way, because sometimes I don't want to be the one to speak for an entire community. But if you think it might be impacting me, ask.
Mhm.
Um, I would say work work small and work up to big. Work with small circles of people. Tell them what your experience is, what your worries are, what your concerns are when it seems natural. Educate them. Again, humanize. I wouldn't, there were days, times when I would post a lot on social media about, I didn't post a lot of political stuff on social media, but I would try. And I'm like, you know, the people who support me, support me. The people who don't, I'm not reaching anybody this way. I'm not changing minds on social media. I am changing minds when I talk to people, when I tell my story. So tell your story, get out there, do your research. At the end of the day, each individual vote matters, and you need to vote with your heart, and whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
And you need to look at the issues that matter to you, all the issues that matter to you. I think we've also, I fear we've gotten so dangerously close to single issue voters that we're missing. There's a whole host of stuff that goes along with this kind of
Right.
thing. And that's on both sides of the aisle. So if you feel really strongly about one singular issue, you might want to look about the stuff that's wrapped around that and go, do you like that? Because I bet you won't. And I think that's be informed. Don't vote based on personality. Don't be vote based on what you see on social media. Vote with what you have learned and talk to the people in your life who matter to you and find out what's important to them and vote like an ally, vote like someone who's impacted, vote like someone who will be impacted, and think carefully about that. I think the last couple days we've seen a lot of energy come back into this thing. It's going to be interesting to see. Just as a theater person, it's going to be real interesting to see the dynamics over the next couple weeks. And I think it's important for those who want to telegraph a message of inclusion, be kinder now than you've ever been in your life. You get more flies with honey than vinegar.
Mhm.
You just do. And if someone's being a real jackass, then fine. But take it out. You don't, what is it? Criticize publicly, criticize privately. I'm like Yogi Berra. I screw these things up. Criticize privately, praise publicly. And I think that's going to be very important. No one wants to be shamed or embarrassed. And I think some of the ugliness we've seen in the last few years are from people who felt embarrassed and they've chosen to act out on that embarrassment. And so don't double down on embarrassing people. Reach out to individuals that you feel maybe are missing the point and say, can we have a conversation? I just want to, I don't want to change your mind. I just want to understand your perspective, and I'd like you to understand mine. And I think that's going to have a bigger multiplier effect than going on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, and spewing a lot of stuff that no one's going to pay attention to.
Right. And creating that open space is so important. And, like that's what we're trying to do at HRC when we're having those conversations and cold calling voters and going to the door. It's about
Mm-hmm.
listening to their perspective, making sure that they're feeling heard, and then talking about, what our
Yeah.
core. And I really like the part too where you said, like vote like you're the one impacted. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so easy for us to tune out issues that don't relate to our personal identities, don't relate to us or what
Mm-hmm.
us. But there's so many people who don't have a voice or who don't have that visibility, that platform to speak on and to stand up for those things. And their voice really matters too. And like you said, it's not just one candidate or another, one issue or another. There's a whole plethora of different visions of American
Mm-hmm.
directions that we can take place. And I think that's why this election coming up is so important. We're 12 days away from the primary and about 104 5 days until the general election in this
Yeah.
November. So I think now is the time to really make your voice heard. It's so critically important, and we fought so hard to have progress in the LGBTQ plus community, and we can't go back on that progress. There are religious groups about a week ago who are trying to sue Michigan for banning conversion therapy. for minors in the state of Michigan. And that's something, the ban on conversion therapy is something that we ended just last year, and already
Yeah.
1 year it's under attack. So, vital rights like marriage equality, gender affirming care, bodily autonomy, they're all under attack this year. And it's so important to show up to the polls, and to get out the vote. And even on the most basic level, have conversations, and like this. So thank
Yeah. And not to sound cynical, but back to your
you.
fact, America will always vote with its dollars more than anything else. So the fact that companies have responded to your uh, what did you call it again? Your index,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they have 13 to 544. That's so again, as we look at the big balance of things, a lot of those kind of legislative moves happen. They know that it's not going to go anywhere, but they're trying because they want to get people riled up. They want to get people thrown off their game. They want us to feel like, oh my God, the world is ending.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not, because those next year you'll probably have 1,200 companies that want to be part of that index, and next year 3,000, because they realize, let's be honest, there's money to be made by being inclusive. And like it or not, that drives America. It's the economy, stupid. That's what they always say. And I think you guys having both those paths going is really smart. And I don't want to sound like ignore those political moves that are happening. Ignore them at your peril. That's the research, right? Look
Right.
at the people who are behind those things, and if you don't agree with them, and don't just focus on everyone focuses on the presidential election, right? Focus on everybody. And folks like HRC Michigan, you put out, my husband downloads it every year, and we look at it, and it's a great resource. Look at every candidate, your local dog catcher. I don't know what it is. You guys do the research. You help us understand. You do a lovely job of that, right? I'm not making that up. You guys do that every year. So that's that kind of information is really important, and it doesn't take long, and it's part of your responsibility. I remember, government class in high school, it was like I had a great teacher that was like, voting is one of the most sacred things you get to do in this country. It's a privilege. So take it
Yeah.
seriously and take an hour and look at the material that, organizations that you feel confident in, like HRC Michigan. Look at what they put out there, read it, do your own research, and look at all of the candidates, because they're all impacting what your way of life will be like. And at the end of the day, they want your vote. So let them know you don't like where they're headed and they need to turn it around. So,
Yeah. And at every level, of course, we are all focusing on the presidential election right now, but at every level, those decision makers
yeah,
on our everyday lives and making
yeah.
informed choices about our votes, who we're electing to school boards, who,
Yep.
you know, is being our,
Your mayor, yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's all going to have an impact. And
Yep.
also to people who you're hiring in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
that's also going to matter as well. So you've done a
Yeah.
great job, trying to further inclusivity, and LGBTQ plus visibility in your workplace. So we see that at HRC Michigan, and we're really thankful for the work that you've done, through Clark Hill, and also just for being here and joining us for this conversation. We really
Well,
appreciate it.
thanks for having me. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for putting up with my technical foibles. I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Roy. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and to learn today.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
How do we hang up?
Let's,
Do I just hit the X?
I think so.
Okay.
We'll see.
Goodbye.
Thanks, folks.